Welcome back to the Policy Viz podcast. I'm your host, John Schwabish. I hope all is well with you. On this week's episode of the show, we take a little bit of a turn away from data visualization into presentation skills, leadership skills, and communication skills. And I'm happy to be joined by Davina Stanley, owner of Clarity First, where she helps clients and organizations do a better job of creating clear and efficient messages. As you're going to hear, Davina has a particular view about track changes, has a particular view about building out and strategizing and outlining your message before you just start diving in and typing and writing up your memos and reports. And this approach, of course, echoed with me because I teach very similar techniques and strategies when it comes to presentation skills, that you don't just boot up PowerPoint or boot up Canva or boot up Keynote, whatever tool you're using, to start making your slides. And instead, you should start by outlining and strategizing and thinking carefully about what you want to say and how you should say it. So we spent a lot of time in our discussion talking about how to take that more strategic, careful approach to your communication. And then we talk about Davina's message map strategy that she uses with her clients, and how that visual approach to outlining and sketching and sort of diagramming out your argument, your point, your diagram, your message, your report, whatever it might be, how that helps people work through the argument before they worry about all the details to get into the part where you're sort of doing all the grammar and you're editing, and it bogs people down and takes a lot of time. So no matter if you are on the data visualization side, if you're on the data communication side, if you're in a leadership position in your organization, I think this podcast episode, along with her book Engage and her other book Elevate, is going to be really valuable for you to help you think about how to create this strategic approach to your communication, rather than just diving in and saying, I'm going to create this thing, be it a dashboard, a graph, a report, a memo, whatever it is, and send it out to people and hope that they sort of get it and hope that they'll give me clear and efficient and productive comments and responses. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode. I certainly enjoyed the conversation. And here is this week's episode of the podcast with Davina Stanley. Hi, Davina. Good to see you. Good to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to meet you too.
Excited to have you on the show. I have your book here, Engage. Love it. Very enjoyable read. Very visual read, which of course I enjoy. So I thought we would start with background. What's your background? How did you get into this area of work, and why did you start your firm Clarity First?
Okay, several questions.
Yeah.
I think so. How did I get into this work? I've got a really unusual career. I began as a kindergarten teacher in Australia, which is not the usual beginning for a McKinsey communication specialist. Right?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
Probably not. But it's really useful. Really useful.
Yeah.
So I grew up on a farm and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I thought anything was possible. I just had no idea what that was. And so anyway, I did teaching because it was a guaranteed ticket off the farm and I liked children. And I learned to communicate taught by a wonderful, wonderful children's author when I was at Teachers College. And so I majored in art while I was there, which will be relevant for when.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, Mem Fox, who writes these most beautiful Australian children books, taught me to communicate and taught me a whole lot of really great things about writing in particular. So I took that away with me. And when I decided for certain that teaching young children probably wasn't for me, I went back to university and studied communication while I was working in a corporate communication role inside a large chemical company. And so, I was doing and learning at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then my husband had this travel bug. And so we moved to Hong Kong. We married very young and we moved to Hong Kong in our mid-20s. And so he saw a job ad when we were there and he thought, oh, McKinsey, I'd love to work for them. And he had a look at this advertisement and he said, oh, oh, that might be for you. And he showed me. And I was like, oh, that looks fun. What's McKinsey? What's management
Ah,
consulting?
yeah,
Oh, okay. That sounds cool.
yeah,
I think I'd like that more than what I'm doing right now. So, okay. So I applied and I got the job. And so I learned the structured communication techniques and disciplines that I use now then.
right.
And that's formed the foundation of the sort of work that I do around how do you blend problem solving and communication so you can crystallize a really clear and compelling message. And so that gave me the foundation. And then why did I start what I'm doing now is a different question in a way. Initially, it was practical. I was
Hmm.
a mum with young children traveling. We moved through lots of different countries. And so I was freelancing. And so I was freelancing back to McKinsey to start with for a long time. I
Hmm.
freelanced for them for about 15 years. And, I did a range of things, including working for Firm Learning, where I was training and coaching people. So it sort of emerged out of all of that. And, a blend of doing things for people and helping people do things. And I really like helping people do things. I just really
Hmm.
enjoy it. So that's the teaching impulse, I
Yeah,
suppose. But bring that together with working with now, everyone from graduates through to the C-suite. I work typically now at the mid to senior levels with clients. And
right.
Clarity First also began as a little bit of an experiment, I guess, to start offering public programs. So when I first started the Clarity First program website, it was back in about 2017. And, people were moving in the corporate sort of world towards a little bit of online learning. And there
Hmm.
were, cohort based programs that you could run online. People were starting to sell online courses to people in corporates, not just their life coaching or how to, I don't know, take a better photograph or those sorts of things, which I think came first in the
Yeah,
sort of online learning space, but rather corporate business skills.
right.
So I wanted to explore that. And so gradually that's become my whole business, to work with corporate clients, but also, um, you know, with the public programs and then the online courses and books as well.
Right.
So I enjoy innovating. I
Yeah.
enjoy solving client problems. I enjoy trying to get better and better at what I do. So it's part of what keeps me doing something that could be argued as being the same thing for a long time.
Right. But yeah, because you have that mix of clients, it probably feels different all the
Oh,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely.
Do you have just a personal question? Do you have a count of the number of countries you've lived in?
Uh, well, Australia, Hong Kong, New York, Tokyo, and the now Seattle,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, but many
Yeah.
places in Australia
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
Mm.
Sure.
For
Um
many different reasons.
yeah. Um so I'm curious if you see common threads of challenges
Hmm.
either within industry or sectors or just
Hmm.
kind of overall
Hmm.
um, that show up when people call you for help.
Hmm. Beautiful. I think common problem overall is what I call the operating rhythm around preparing important communication. And I think what happens is people don't realize, leaders don't realize the importance of their role in setting their team up to draft messaging. They focus on documents, they don't focus on messaging. So, what I encourage people to do is to think first about the outcome they need from their communication. So, what is the communication strategy for this presentation, for this deck? And that might be really quick, right?
Hmm.
Oh, we've got to get them to trust that everything's okay, everything's on progress. Or we need them to agree to adjust the way we're going forward a little.
Hmm.
We need them to decide. We need them to support us so we can actually deliver. What is the outcome you want?
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's really quick, but sometimes that's a lot of thinking work that the leader really needs to be involved in, because if they don't get involved in that early, what happens is the team goes away and does their very best to draft something that'll be useful. And they use a whole lot of cues around them. What's been done before. Maybe there's a corporate template that they need to use. Maybe they think somebody else is a great communicator. They'll try and do it like they do. Maybe they'll just do what they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do something and they'll send it up to their manager, and their manager will open it up and go, right, Mary's done a lot of really great work here. Mary and Fred and Bill, however many people, they've put a lot of effort into this, and I really need to do it justice.
Right.
So I can see the effort, that's great, but I need time to think. I need time to think to really get into this and decide whether it hits the mark or not, because I
Yeah.
can't see at first glance. So, okay, I'm back to back in meetings now for the next week, and it's not due just yet. So I'll get to it. And what happens is it waits, it lingers, and it lingers until it becomes urgent, maybe a day or two before it needs to be submitted or presented.
Mm-hmm.
And so the manager goes, right, I need to do that thing for Mary. And they open it up at 9 o'clock at night, or maybe on Sunday afternoon, and they get into it. And they're going through it and they say, right, there's loads of great stuff here, but they haven't crystallized the message. They're missing the strategic context. No, that's not right. Yeah, that's useful information, but we need to put it in its place. So they get faced with a couple of choices. Time has now run out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to delegate it back, partly because they're also working out of hours. And this stuff typically happens out of hours, not always, but typically. And so, right, can I delegate it back? Maybe. If I do that, I'm going to put a few stickies on it, or I'm going to put some comments in track changes. And 9 times out of 10, they focus on the minutia. They don't focus on the real substance. They're trying to fix these little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one option. Another option is just to ask some questions and get information back, and
Mm-hmm.
to and fro like that. Another option is to redo it, and that's where people end up. They end
Yeah.
up redoing it. So what happens is leaders end up doing their team's work for them,
Right.
not because their team can't, but because their team hasn't been set up to know how.
Right.
And so that's a common problem that I see everywhere, which is why I wrote Engage. And I
Mm-hmm.
wrote the partner book that goes with that called Elevate, which is for the leader. So I wrote 2 books in parallel, which I think is a sure sign of madness. All right. One for the individual contributor and one
Right.
for the leader. And whether you're a manager of a team or you're a CEO, the principles in the Elevate book are the same, really. It's
Mm-hmm.
how do you set everyone up for success so that instead of receiving that draft document to review, you can set them up well and head them off in the right direction and allow room for evolution during
Right.
that time as well. And then you get given a draft, which is this 1-page message map,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really structured and it's really easy to get to the message. So even if you open it up at the end of your day, or maybe, at 9 o'clock at night, you can see the message. You know that you don't have to put hours aside, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. You can review it and you can go back and say, look, I've made a few adjustments here and here and here. Here's why. Or you can say, look, let's have a call. I think we need to rethink this.
Yeah.
Or actually, what I meant was, can you have another go? So you're setting yourself up to be able to contribute really constructively and be part of that dialogue around what is the
Mm-hmm.
messaging that we need here to drive progress in the business.
Yeah.
And it changes the nature of it, because I think another thing happens with these 1 pages. People are really happy to roll up their sleeves and talk about it,
Yeah.
discuss. Whereas when somebody sends you a document that they've sweated, you're treading on eggshells a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because you know that they've put a lot of effort into it, and you're put into a position where you've become a critic
Yeah.
rather than a collaborator,
Right.
right? And that's no fun for everybody. It's like, oh, how do I do that delicately? How do
Right.
I not stomp on all of the good stuff they've done? How do I work with them,
Mm-hmm.
during office hours as
Right.
much as you can, to get a really collaborative and constructive outcome?
Right. You start at least the engage book, which I have here,
Yeah.
um, kind of making an argument that I make a lot as well, which is it may sound like doing this message map, you know, up front is going to cost you more, is going to cost you time because you're not writing the document right away. But
Yes.
in the long run, you're actually going to save a ton of time
Correct.
because you have done this outline. So, can you talk a little bit about that aspect of this? Because
Yes.
I can totally imagine the Elevate book, which I don't have next to it, but I could imagine that's probably a big part of that, which is like, look, you as a CEO, as the president, you're gonna save a lot of time, even
Yeah.
though maybe it doesn't feel like that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the hard thing for the leaders is to get their heads into the topic early. It's so much easier to react to something. So I
Hmm.
think that's what tends to happen. And people are moving at pace
Yeah.
quite a lot. But I think what I encourage people to do is think about time a bit differently. And think so if you think about the feeling of time, which you feel productive, you feel like you're making progress when you got that request to prepare that update, and it's like, okay, right, roll sleeves up, start typing. You
Yeah.
feel like you're doing something, so it feels like I'm on it, I'm doing. So it's that feeling that's deceptive, I think.
Yeah.
If you start to think about time as the time you start preparing to the time you get a result, as opposed to the time you start preparing and the time you hit send, you get a very
Hmm.
different view of time. So even with emails, very rarely would you prepare a one-page message map for an email, but
Right.
the same principles of a really short introduction, one highly visible main message that's maybe bold with white space around it so you can see it, it's obvious, and a small number of supporting points. That principle applies to email as well. And I had a wonderful example late last year when I spoke with a client, and they used the technique to write an email, and then he emailed me back later on, and he said to me, "Oh my gosh, I sent this request to Deborah. I think her name was Deborah, and normally she would say, okay, can we have a chat about that?" And we
Yeah.
have a couple of 30-minute conversations. And then she'd go, "Yeah, all right." This time, we spent that bit of time, thinking about the message for the email. I sent the email, and she came back within 20 minutes and said, "Okay, thanks." That was it.
Right.
He sort of
Right.
went, "Huh, okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never had that before.
Is it I wonder if it's just a problem of people not outlining. I mean, this is the thing I always talk when I talk about presentations, right? Like start by outlining and sketching, and
Mhm,
essentially my version of your message map, right?
mhm,
Um, and the line that I always tell people is like we're taught to write an outline on our first book report back in like fourth grade, right? Like we have to write an outline before the teacher lets us
mhm,
write the thing.
mhm, mhm.
Do you think we as adults just forget that? Is it just like we gotta get to the next thing? We think we're so organized, but we're not. Like,
I think it's more than that. I think it's how do you outline, and it's
mm,
what do you outline. Even more importantly, it's what do you
hmm,
outline, because that strategy piece, thinking about that outcome that you want. Very often when I work with people on, let's think about, a significant communication, let's say, where I might have a 2-hour coaching session with some people who've learnt the techniques through workshops that I've given them, let's say. And so we have a 2-hour coaching session together, and we really get into this strategy thing. And they've, of course, got to tell me about what the story's about, what do we need, who are we communicating to. So we've got to go through that process, which they need to do for themselves anyway.
yeah,
Um, but I might need a little bit of extra context because I'm out of context. So allowing for that, sometimes we'll take 90 minutes out of 2 hours to really nail who it is that matters on that decision making body, steering
right,
committee, leadership team, board. Who are the couple of people that matter the most? Have we got inside their heads yet? Are they going to be for or against what we're putting forward? Why? What are their issues? really drilling into that so that once that is clear, then we can say, right, we can then step forward and say, okay, well, now we know broadly what we need to say. Whereas because people go to outlining and they actually don't really know what they need to say,
Yeah.
they also have a habit, I find, of putting down topics of conversation rather than messages,
Oh,
right?
interesting. Yeah.
And they don't understand how to connect the messages to each other so that together it's a really cohesive, coherent story.
Yeah.
So decision makers want to be able to see the message really fast.
Hmm.
So most business communication is, when you're getting a decision, is about explaining yourself. Now, it's got to be persuasive. It's got to be the right tone. You've got to be careful not to be too strong or too weak. You've got to factor in emotion to that sort of extent.
Right.
But ultimately, people want to be able to make a good decision quickly,
Yeah.
factoring in the context and the stakeholders and all of the corporate stuff that goes around it.
Hmm.
But they want to be able to make a good decision quickly. What they don't want is to spend quite some time trying to understand the pre-read, coming to the meeting with a whole lot of please explain questions, clarification questions.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me? Can you explain that to me? And then at the end, sending people off with more questions,
Yeah.
right? They
Right.
want to be able to understand the pre-read if there is one. If not, they want a really quick presentation that's crisp and clear without somebody reading through every slide. It's like, no, 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 no. Just tell me what this is about so we can have a proper conversation, debate the issue, get the decision, and move on. Or I was at a conference last week in Houston, and one of the people there said to me, I think he was originally given 20 minutes to put forward, like it was like $170 million request, right? So big, big
Yeah.
request.
Yeah.
And so he had 20 minutes to pitch it. And he got in and they said, really sorry, you've got 2 minutes. And he went,
Mm.
okay. And he could do it because the
Right.
messaging was so clear. So he pitched it in, he said 90 seconds and said, okay, do we agree then? And the
Yeah.
chairman of the board said, hang on, that's my job. You know? But he got his decision.
Yeah.
So, and I think one of the stories I share in the book is with an old colleague and client of mine, Mike, where he said to one of his team, look, just put it on a page. You've got the deck, but you've got the all the messaging on at the beginning. And they went into the meeting together with, I forget if it was a client or a boss, and the boss said, oh, good, I can see what you mean there. That's great,
Hmm.
love it. Off you go then. Please do what you said you want to do. And Amy was her name, the person working with my colleague, was like, what? Don't you want to see? Don't you want to see everything? All these things.
All
Don't
the
you want to
details.
see
Yeah.
that? And he's like, no, if you can make it as clear and compelling as that, it's obvious to me you've done
Right.
your thinking. It's
Right.
obvious you've done your thinking. And I know you, I trust you, you're thorough. I can't see any holes in that. Go do it. The
Yeah.
next thing,
It's interesting. You said the word trust, and I have that noted on my notes here, and I wonder um, how often you run into issues of trust between the manager and their
Mm-hmm.
staff,
Mm-hmm.
and is it, how much of it is trust and how much of it is kind of I think the practical core of the book, which
Yes.
is, how do you outline your message and all this that we've been talking about. But I guess my question would be, do you run into cases when you're working with clients where there's just a total lack of trust between groups, and building that trust is a big part of the challenge you need to help them overcome?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's actually quite common. I don't
Yeah.
think it's surfaced very often. I don't
Right.
think it's delivered as the key issue. But
Hmm.
I did have one client again at the very end of last year, which is very convenient for the conversation we're
Yeah.
having, who I was emailing with the leader while I worked with some of his team in a highly, highly technical area
Hmm.
of technology products, very senior product managers in technology.
Yeah.
And the manager came back and said, you know, my problem with the original draft that he gave you was that it doesn't look to me like they know what they're doing,
Ah,
right? So if
right.
you present material that is all over the place and it's just data, 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 it's not tied together to pull together a cohesive, structured message.
Right.
Your decision maker has to work far too hard to work out what's being said. They
Yeah.
want to know why that is. Nobody wants to work intellectually very hard. Everyone
Right.
wants it to be easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So, and there's biology to that. But, we have to make it easy for our decision makers to understand what we're saying. Otherwise, they have to do too much work. They're frustrated with you for not doing that work, that thinking
Hmm.
work. And it does erode trust because they think if you know your stuff, you should be able to say it.
Right.
And
Right.
so if you can't say it, maybe you don't know it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think trust becomes, you know,
Becomes
a
a big
very
part of
big
it.
issue, but I don't think it's one that people will confess very often.
Right. And it's I guess it's a subtle difference the way you framed it, at least, was it's not that I don't trust you as a person, as an individual, because I hired you and you're still
Hmm,
working here and you do
hmm,
good work. It's
hmm.
that I don't it's kind of like I don't trust your ability to effectively communicate to me, which is
Although it does bring competence questions also,
sure.
right?
Sure. Right.
So it,
Yeah.
it does create competence questions.
Yeah.
And, you know, we hire people and we hope that they're going to be able to do what we want them to do,
Right.
but they can't always. So
Yeah.
it does raise questions, I think. I think it
Yeah.
eradicates confidence.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um the when you talk about the message map in the book, there are lots of really good images of examples and ways to sort of structure it. And I'll let people buy the book so that they can get the template for themselves. But I'm curious, because you've already sort of talked about a few different ways in which the message maps are kind of used in an
Hmm,
email versus a
hmm.
document. And I'm curious how much the look or the visual of the
Yes.
map actually matters for people.
Yes. Yes. So I don't think people tend to send the one pager very much as an email, although they might sometimes.
Right.
They might. I think in some contexts where clients are using it all at once and learning it together, it becomes symbolic. Hey,
Hmm.
I'm doing the thing like
Yeah.
we've agreed we're going to do. So it can be symbolic in that regard when you're sending by email. I think in email you take the principles that underpin it
Yeah.
and probably use it in that way. Um, so I think visualizing a message is really key. So one of the reasons I think the way we do the one pager is so helpful is because it makes it very easy to navigate the hierarchy of the messaging.
Hmm.
So we have a panel, just short, a small panel on the left, which allows for a short introduction, which again is a bit of a trap. People often want to dump a whole lot of information at the beginning
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
think people need to know before they can
Right.
understand. And then they lose everybody who then doesn't want to understand. So we make that physically small. So we use constraints by the nature of the shape to push
Hmm.
people to stick with the shape. So it's a short introduction in a small sort of panel on the left. But then we have a big box at the top with the main message in bigger font. So you can see, well, that's the main thing. If
Yeah.
all you do is read that, that's the thing. That's the engine of the whole story. And then below that, we have some boxes which have got the next level down in the hierarchy. And they look smaller than the main message, but bigger than the ones below. And then you go down another level. So visually, it makes it very easy to see where things belong, makes it very neat. It's a bit like, I don't know if you heard of that woman, Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Marie Kondo for your thinking.
Yeah.
Everything's in a place. And so even if you don't understand the principles, at a great depth that underpin it, it's
Right.
pretty easy to go, oh, that doesn't belong there. Why is that there? Oh, I don't, they're not the same.
Right.
They're, this isn't persuading me. I think we need more
Mm-hmm.
on that topic. It's very easy to sort of comment and
Mm-hmm.
contribute on the messaging, and it forces you to get up out of the weeds, unless you do what one of my engineering clients said was, oh, that one page thing. Yeah, that we liked it, but
Yeah.
we solved it for you because it really didn't work for us. So you
Mm.
said 10-point font minimum. Four. Four is much better.
For
And we need like A2.
So you've just made a document that's way harder to read. Right.
Correct.
Okay. Great.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
we couldn't get it. We couldn't.
Right. We couldn't fit it.
We
So
couldn't.
yeah.
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 But so think about a hierarchy with like a tree.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm encouraging people to do. So you've got your main message at the top of the tree. You've
Mm-hmm.
got then a small 2 to 5 ideas below, and then you keep unpacking as you go, and you go down as far as you need. I mean, if you're writing a book, the tree's very deep, but
Right.
it's still limited at the top to 1, and then no more than 5, right?
Right.
You can go as deep as you like. So, um, yeah, I think the visual aspect of that is really important. And
Mm.
when you then translate that into a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes the one page is enough. You get your decision. You don't need a deck.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
That might disappoint people who love making decks, but a
Yeah.
lot of people just want to get the decision. So one pager might be enough, may not.
Right.
If not, okay, so then you've got to make a deck. So you structure the deck around that messaging,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it becomes a 1-for-1 match. You
Yeah.
have a title page, you have a short introduction for maybe a page, then you have your executive summary with your main message and your top line points, and then you unpack it section by section. And it's driven by the messaging,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have to use a template and you've got sections that are mandated, you've got like a mini story for each
Yeah.
section. So that's fine. That's
Right.
cool. But again, within each section, your main message is the main thing,
Yeah.
and you're breaking it out below. So the hierarchy of the ideas becomes important. And then within that, you might also say, actually, I need to visualize that as a framework.
Yeah.
I've got 5 steps.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
I don't want just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and words.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to make it go by time and it be a flow, or maybe it's some other interconnection of things that you want to visualize. So you do that, but you're doing it within the confines of the message and the
Right.
structure of the messaging. So the visualization is important to that level, but
Yeah.
also then in a prose or a Word document too.
Mm.
If you look in the book, you'll see that if you skim it, if you just flip it, the more important ideas, you can just thumb it, and you
Right.
can get the general idea of the whole story very quickly,
Right.
because they're bigger font. In my case, they're blue, they're colored. There are so many more layers. So it's a book. There have to be more layers. So there needs to be more differentiation for the
Mm-hmm.
layers, for the formatting. But you can skim it to see the story because it's
Yeah.
all directly linked to the messaging.
So I do want to get to Word before we finish, but to Microsoft Word, but is your experience working with folks to do this exercise? What is the biggest or most common challenge you see with folks? Is that they're kind of unable to drill down? Is it that they're I mean, yeah, I guess like what is the thing that holds them back from being successful in this exercise?
I think it depends a bit according to the way their brains work,
Hmm.
right? So, and that can be clustered by industry and or
Hmm.
type of role more than industry, I think, to generalize, to be really general.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
it doesn't always work that way. But some people, so people who are really good at technical details, engineers, technology people, people who've got some sort of very technical discipline, um, sometimes struggle to come up to tell the story, to say why those details matter, right?
yeah.
So
Hmm.
I teach them to come out of the detail, but also to place those details in a commercial context, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, why does that solution matter? What value is it going to bring? How's the decision going to be made? So there's a bit of that
Yeah.
in that very technical space. Where you've got people who get that intuitively, yeah, got it, and they're
Right.
very quick at coming up with the message. Sometimes I have to teach them to come into the detail and
Okay.
to be able to say, okay, why is that the right thing? Can you
Yeah.
justify it? They jump from A to Z
Mm.
because they can just see it intuitively.
Right. Yeah.
And they struggle to sort of build the case, if you like, in
Hmm.
a different kind of a way. So it depends on the way their brains work. So my job is partly to intuit in a heartbeat what kind of help somebody needs. And within a
Right.
group, how to explain things according to what, the balance of the group needs, because there'll be a mix within the group.
Right.
So I think it's that. But I think if you sort of say what is the most significant problem, it's really getting the strategy right for the communication to work out what it is that you need to say.
Hmm.
That isn't as obvious as it seems,
Yeah.
because people tend to focus on, I need to update, which means that you then tell them what you're doing
Yeah.
rather than what you need,
Right.
right? So they
Yeah.
tend to look back too much rather than looking forward,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that becomes, oh right, yeah, okay, that's a light bulb. It's
Yeah.
a big light bulb for people.
Well, I can also see it for the more technical folks who tend to be more in the weeds and
Hmm,
like that's their
it's their
comfortable
genius.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Um, okay, so one last question for you.
Hmm.
Well, actually two, but because you spend a good chunk of the beginning of the book, and we've talked about this a bit already. But like, when are Microsoft track changes good?
Oh, when are they good? With the advent of AI, well,
Yeah.
when are they good? I think we can insert AI in the process to reduce the need for them a little bit
Yeah.
by saying, putting into Copilot or something and saying, please get this to a grade 7 or grade 8, no more, reading level.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Using
Yeah.
active language. So we can do that. So we can get rid of the need for track changes to fix those kinds of things, right? We
Right.
don't need that anymore, which is good news because it means that track changes can be used for the smart stuff. So my argument would be that track changes should be used very little, because the solution, it should be solved before you get to the document,
Mm.
right?
Right.
The combination of the message map and AI to fine tune your expression.
Right.
um, Track changes, I think, and this is the first time I've been asked this question, okay, but very rarely now,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they keep you in the weeds,
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like in a contract, in a legal contract or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
documenting
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is interesting how the AI piece does kind of change a lot of this calculus, right? Because yeah, you can have this really technical document, and then if you want to have it for another person or another audience or whatever, yeah, you just feed it in and say, you know, like you said, make this a seventh grade reading level, and then go back in and sort of finish and polish it up. Yeah, it does change things.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't
well,
just to sort of jump into what you said there, though.
yeah.
I think that the 7 or 8 reading level is essential for CEOs and board directors too,
Hmm.
right? So I think
Yeah,
that's, pretty healthy level for everybody. If you're changing who you're sending it to, AI might help you think about what to say, but it doesn't help you know what to say,
that's right.
right?
Right. Right.
Because
Absolutely.
that's the bit that the humans actually have to
Yeah,
do.
the humans have to do still.
Mm.
Yeah. Until the Terminators take over, then it's a whole different story.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
Yeah,
Davina, thank you so much. The book is Engaged, and it's cousin book Elevate. Um, Folks listening to the show have their own challenges communicating. How can they find you? How can they get in touch to get help with their teams?
beautiful. So my website is clarityfirstprogram.com. And if they like what they hear and they want to dip their toe in the water just a little bit, if they
Hmm.
go to clarityfirstprogram.com/emails, I've got a emails in better emails in 10 minutes course.
Okay.
So they might find that useful.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously the book goes a lot further than that,
Yeah.
but that would get them started very quickly.
Awesome. Terrific. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure, John. Great to speak with you.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to check out Davina's website, Clarity First, also her books, Engage and Elevate. And, of course, take a minute or two of your day to rate or review the podcast. Really, really appreciate it. You can go to any of your podcast providers to do so. If you're watching it on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up so that I know folks are out there and listening to the show each and every other week. Okay, that's all I've got for this week's episode of the show. Until next time, this has been the Policy Viz podcast. Thanks so much for listening.